Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting right into a topic that's really reshaping how a lot of professional services work.
We are. We're looking at AI, specifically, large language models, and how they're becoming this dedicated co-pilot for business analysis.
Right, for modeling specifically.
Exactly. We've gone through a bunch of industry presentations on this, and the whole goal is to streamline the BA workflow. Our mission here really is to help you see how BAs can go from this slow manual documentation process to, well, high-speed modeling driven purely by text.
And also to understand the new trade-offs, right? Because they're always trade-off.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
Especially when it comes to validation and risk.
Uh,
That's a huge piece of this.
okay, so before we get into the mechanics of it all, I think we have to ask the basic question. Why do we even still need visual models? I mean, if an AI can just generate a perfect text document of requirements, why bother with drawing boxes and arrows?
That's the thing. It's not about the amount of text. It's about clarity. Our sources all point to the same problem. Too much text just leads to low clarity.
It's just a wall of words.
It's a wall of words. And models are the shortcut through that wall. They simplify all that complexity, almost instantly. They make the information digestible for everyone, from the tech teams to the business stakeholders.
It reminds me of that old saying, all models are wrong.
But some are
Yeah.
useful. Exactly. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is communication. And what AI does is it just massively, massively accelerates our ability to create those useful communicative models.
So that really changes the BA's job description, doesn't it? You're not aiming for this perfect, flawless artifact. You're optimizing for shared understanding and doing it fast.
You've got it. That's the whole shift.
So if we look at that traditional BA workflow, you have elicitation, then analysis, and then definition. How does this AI copilot actually plug into each of those stages?
Well, it's there from the very beginning. In the elicitation phase, when you're just gathering information, the AI is already working. It can generate interview checklists for you based on the initial scope.
Okay, so it helps you prepare.
Right. And then after a meeting, you can just dump in your messy rough notes, and it structures them for you. But here's the most valuable part, I think. It analyzes those notes and points out the gaps. It'll say, hey, you haven't asked this crucial question yet.
Wow, so it's like an instant second pair of eyes. That cuts down on so much of the post-meeting cleanup and prep for the next one.
A huge amount. Then you move into the analysis phase. This is where the AI becomes more of a logic engine. It can take a huge block of text and generate a clear workflow summary. Or, and this is really powerful, it can do reverse engineering.
What do you mean by that?
Imagine you have some, convoluted set of old business rules. The AI can take that and boil it down into an understandable visual flow. It helps you find the actual logic hidden in all that complexity.
And then comes the definition phase, which is where it all becomes concrete.
And this is where the speed is just incredible. The AI can draft your foundational documents, your epics, your user stories, your acceptance criteria. But the real game changer is the automated creation of diagrams from that text.
Right.
And it even drafts preliminary test cases that link directly back to those requirements. So the BA isn't a manual draftsman anymore. They're more like an information conductor. The whole flow is business need to BA to the Gen AI, which creates the model, which leads to shared understanding.
That flow sounds incredible, but it feels like it all hangs on a new skill. You mentioned text-driven modeling. The sources are calling this the fastest skill for BAs. What does that actually look like day to day?
It means we stop drawing. We stop dragging and dropping boxes and arrows in a tool.
Okay, so what do we do instead?
We write. The BA writes a few lines of structured text. It's almost like writing a markdown. And the LLM takes that text and converts it into the specific code needed for a diagramming language like Mermaid or Plant UML.
And the time saving there is?
It's the auto layout,
Yeah.
by far. BAs used to burn so much mental energy just fighting with alignment and spacing and making things look clean. Now you just write the logic, and the tool builds the whole visual for you, perfectly arranged.
So the bottleneck isn't visual design anymore, it's prompt precision. And you're seeing this with a bunch of different languages. Mermaid, Structurizer.
Yes, Illograph, a few others. But Mermaid is probably the most common right now because it's so widely integrated.
Yeah.
And, the sources have this great example they call it the 30-second diagram demo.
30 seconds, that's
Right.
transformative. But that speed only matters if the output is actually good, if it reflects the real business logic. So what are the absolute non-negotiable rules for prompting to get a clean diagram out?
Yeah, quality requires structure. You can't just throw messy text at it. So first rule, the output needs to have explicit names for every single node. No A connects to B.
It has to be descriptive, user login or verify credentials.
Exactly. Second, it needs to follow a strict top-to-bottom flow, which is pretty standard for workflows. But the most important rule, the one that turns a picture into a real process model, is this. You have to use verb phrases on the arrows.
Okay, explain that.
If you have an arrow from system A to system B, the label on that arrow can't just be a line. It has to be an action, like requests data or returns confirmation. Without those verbs, they're just boxes. With them, it's a process. It shows what's actually happening.
I see. The sources had a simple example for this, didn't they? Something about making tea.
They did.
Yeah.
You take a simple sequence like user makes tea, goes upstairs, does work, goes home. And when you prompt the LLM correctly, it doesn't just draw 4 boxes. It creates a structured mermaid flowchart with nodes named make tea and arrows clearly labeled with actions like decides to or initiates. That's the difference between a quick sketch and a functional model.
It enforces rigor.
It does. And speaking of prompting, the material also highlighted something called the universal router prompt, which I thought was genius.
What's that?
It's for when you, as the BA, aren't totally sure what kind of diagram you need. Is this an ERD? Is it a sequence diagram? A simple flow. You just tell the LLM to use the router prompt.
And it decides for you.
Better. It asks you clarifying questions first. It'll say, it sounds like you're describing a process. Is a flowchart what you need, or are you more interested in how systems interact over time? It makes the AI an active partner in the decision. It's a true co-pilot.
That's a huge help in clarifying your own thoughts. So let's talk about the tools. We have a few big LLMs out there. Since diagramming needs such strict syntax, how do they stack up against each other?
You really have to look at it based on your specific needs. If your company lives and breathes Microsoft Teams, Office, all of that, then MS Copilot is a really natural fit.
Makes sense.
It's tightly integrated, and it's pretty good at generating basic mermaid diagrams. The thing is, it's a bit conservative. It tends to struggle with more complex things, like intricate state diagrams.
So what do you use for the really heavy lifting?
For that, the sources pointed to ChatGPT, especially if you're running it through a private, internal platform. It seems to be the best for raw reasoning and complex modeling. Things like detailed ERDs, where it has to manage primary and foreign keys correctly, or complex process flows.
And that consistency makes it good for training, I'd imagine.
It's ideal for enterprise training, yeah. Everyone gets a predictable, high-quality result.
What about the others, like Claude or Gemini?
They're very strong on the analysis side of things,
Yeah.
but for generating that really strict, unforgiving syntax that diagramming code requires, well, they can sometimes be a little less predictable than ChatGPT. The punctuation or ordering might be slightly off.
Then we have a category we absolutely can't ignore, especially for finance or healthcare, local LLMs.
Absolutely critical. Running a model like Llama locally, maybe using a tool like Obsidian with Ollama, means everything is offline. All your data stays inside your secure network. For some organizations, that is non-negotiable.
But there's a trade-off.
Of course. The trade-off is speed and maybe a bit of reasoning power. They're slower, and for the most complex analysis, they might not be quite as sharp as the big cloud models. But they get the job done for text to diagram, and they meet that essential security need.
So the range of what these tools can produce is pretty vast. The sources mentioned everything from flowcharts and user journeys to really technical stuff like ERDs and sequence diagrams.
Right, and they also noted that something like the C4 model for software architecture is actually really straightforward for LLMs to handle because it's so hierarchical and structured by nature.
And what about for BAs who are stuck working with, ancient legacy systems?
This is one of my favorite use cases.
Yeah.
You can take a chunk of old, messy procedural code, like a 20-year-old stored procedure full of nested if-then statements,
The kind nobody wants to touch.
the kind nobody understands. And you could prompt the AI to reverse engineer it into a sequence diagram. It will visualize the logic, showing all the lifelines and message flows. It's like turning technical debt into instant clarity.
That's incredible. But what about when things are even messier? When you have tons of disparate data sources and undocumented flows? Can text modeling handle that?
That's when you might need to step up to a more specialized tool. The sources brought up something called illograph, which uses YAML.
Okay, why YAML?
Because a simple language like Mermaid is linear, it's great for a process. But illograph's YAML structure is built to handle complex, layered hierarchies. It lets a BA model that messy SIS data flow nightmare and then map it clearly to the clean to be state you're aiming for.
It's a huge shift. The AI is handling the layout, the code, the design, which brings us right to that 80-20 rule you mentioned. if the AI is doing 80% of the work, what is the BA's essential 20%?
This is the absolute core of the new job. The sources were really clear on this. AI does 80%, but the BAA does the 20% that actually matters.
And that 20% is validation.
It's pure critical validation of business meaning.
But why? I mean, if the AI is trained on basically the entire internet, why can't we just trust its output? Why is the human check so non-negotiable?
Because the AI produces shape, but the BA has to produce truth. That's the key. The single biggest risk is hallucination. The LLM is a brilliant pattern matcher, but it has no real-world context of your specific project.
Right, it doesn't know your business.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
So it might invent a missing step in a process because it seems logical. It might merge two different concepts because their names are similar. Or, and this is the most dangerous one, it might introduce terminology that isn't in your official project glossary.
So there's a critical difference between syntax and logic.
That's it, right there. A tool like Mermaid will validate the syntax. It makes sure the code is written correctly so a diagram appears. It does not and cannot validate the logic. It doesn't know if that process is actually what your business does. The BA is the final owner of meaning, period.
Okay, so if we accept that this is the new division of labor, what are the immediate best practices a BA needs to adopt to manage that risk?
There are a few that are absolutely crucial. First, start with good quality text, garbage in, garbage out. Second, use strict, clear prompts. The parser needs that structure. Third, use the AI early in the process during elicitation. Don't wait until the end. It helps you ask better questions from the start.
And in terms of the diagrams themselves?
Keep them small. The sources say if you go past 10 or 12 nodes in a single view, the complexity and the risk of hallucination just shoot up. Bring it down into subviews. And the most important rule of all, do not let the AI invent terminology. Every single label must follow the project glossary. If the AI creates a new term, you've just created terminology debt.
That's a great point. So once you have this fast AI-assisted draft in Mermaid, how does a big company ensure that all these models are consistent and standardized?
There's a clear three-step path. 1. Draft and iterate fast in Mermaid with AI assistance. 2. Validate that model with business stakeholders. That's the truth check. And 3. Convert the validated model into a structured, enterprise-grade tool like Eris.
Ah, so Eris is the final destination.
Right. Eris provides that robust, standardized environment for version control, a central repository, and long-term enterprise consistency. The AI gets you to clarity quickly. The enterprise tool ensures that clarity lasts.
You know, what this whole deep dive shows me is that the business analyst isn't being replaced at all. The mechanical labor of the BA is what's being automated.
Exactly. It forces BAs to stop being draftsmen and focus entirely on semantic rigor, on validation, on the parts of the job that actually require a human brain.
And the technology is getting smarter every day. The source material even had an example of an AI debugging its own diagram code.
It did. It corrected its own syntax errors and then explained to the user why a different diagram type would have been a better choice for their input.
So if the AI can generate the shape, debug its own code, and handle the layout, that really puts the pressure on the BA to master a completely different set of skills.
It absolutely does. And that brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with. If an AI can now flawlessly generate the shape and correct the syntax of a diagram in seconds, how quickly must the BA adapt their skills to focus purely on the semantic, business-critical meaning embedded within that diagram? AI is mastering the language of diagrams. The BA must now master the language of business logic.
That is the essential challenge and opportunity for every analyst out there today. Thank you for walking us through this.
It was my pleasure.